My stepmom hid my dad's will. Then she claimed everything, until I found the backup document. I never expected to lose my father so suddenly. The call came in the middle of my workday, the kind of news that shatters your world without warning. When I arrived at the hospital, I found my stepmom, Rachel, already there, her eyes filled with a mix of grief and something else, something I couldn't quite place. At the reading of the will, my heart raced as Rachel, with a calculated calmness, announced that my father had left everything to her. I sat in stunned silence, the room echoing with disbelief. This was a man who had always talked about keeping the family business intact, ensuring it stayed in the family. How could he have changed his mind without telling me? As I sat there, the weight of betrayal settled in my stomach. My father had mentioned plans for a backup will just weeks before his passing, a conversation that had slipped my mind until now. My heart sank as I realized that Rachel's expression had shifted from sorrow to triumph when the lawyer read the final lines. I felt the air grow thick, suffocating me. Once the reading concluded, I forced myself to stay calm. Rachel's smile was too wide, too confident, and it sent a chill down my spine. I excused myself under the pretense of needing fresh air, but I was really searching for clarity. What if this was all a manipulation? What if Rachel had been plotting this for longer than I could imagine? I drove home, my mind racing with questions. The family business had been my father's pride and joy. It was a legacy he wanted to pass down. I recalled the many nights we spent discussing its future, the way he envisioned my role in it. Did Rachel really think she could erase all that with a piece of paper? I needed to know more. The next day, I decided to visit my father's office, a place I hadn't been to since his passing. As I entered, the familiar scent of cedar and leather enveloped me, but it felt tainted now. I scanned the room, searching for any sign of that backup will he had mentioned. Was it hidden among the stacks of paperwork? Did he keep it in his desk? I opened drawers, rifling through files, my heart pounding with each page I flipped. I found old contracts, invoices, and personal letters, but nothing that pointed to the will. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a small, nondescript box tucked away in the corner of the desk. My pulse quickened as I approached it, hopeful yet anxious. Inside the box, I found a collection of documents, but they were all personal letters and photos. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. My father's meticulous nature suggested he wouldn't just leave the will unguarded. I needed to dig deeper to uncover whatever secrets were hidden in this office. Just then, my brother Jake walked in, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. "What are you doing here?" he asked, looking around the room. I hesitated, unsure how to explain the whirlwind of emotions I was feeling. Instead, I blurted out, "Did Dad ever mention a backup will to you?" Jake's brow furrowed as he thought. I remember him talking about it once, but I didn't think much of it. He said something about ensuring everything was in order, especially for the business. What? My heart raced. If he remembered that conversation, it meant I wasn't alone in my suspicions. We both felt it, the nagging doubt that Rachel had orchestrated something. We decided to team up, our shared sense of urgency igniting a fire in me. Jake suggested we ask around the office, see if anyone had noticed anything strange about Rachel's behavior since Dad's passing. The thought of confronting her made my stomach churn, but we needed to know what was happening behind the scenes. That evening, I gathered my courage and reached out to a few of my father's closest employees. I wanted to hear if anyone had noticed any changes, any signs of Rachel's manipulation. Their responses were cautious, each one filled with a sense of unease that mirrored my own. I could feel the tension building, like a storm waiting to break. As I hung up the phone, a sense of dread settled over me. What if Rachel had been planning this for a long time? What if she had already secured allies among the staff? I felt like I was stepping into a web of deceit, and every thread pulled tighter with each passing moment. I returned to my father's office the next day, determined to find that will. The urgency clawed at me as I rifled through the same drawers, convinced I had missed something. Just as I was about to give up, I spotted a small, locked safe embedded in the wall behind his desk. My heart raced. Could this be where the original will was hidden? But how could I open it? I scanned the room for any clues, any signs that might help me unlock this mystery. My father had always been a man of secrets, but this was different. I needed to know what he had truly intended for the family business and for me. The clock was ticking, and I could feel Rachel's shadow looming over everything. I left the office that day with more questions than answers, but I was resolved to uncover the truth. I had to find a way to get into that safe. I couldn't let Rachel's claim go unchallenged. The stakes were too high, and my father's legacy was on the line. The days following the will reading felt like a foggy dream, each hour stretching into an eternity. I kept replaying Rachel's words in my head, trying to reconcile them with the father I knew. The shock of her claim was still fresh, but deeper emotions were bubbling beneath the surface. Anger, betrayal, confusion. I felt like a stranger in my own life, and the walls of our family business, once a source of pride, now loomed like a prison around me. I spent hours in my father's old office, surrounded by the remnants of his life. The smell of leather and wood polish was a bittersweet reminder of the countless conversations we'd had about the future of the business. My heart raced as I rifled through his desk drawers, hoping for something, anything, that would hint at the truth. Each paper I flipped felt like a potential lifeline, yet all I found were old invoices and forgotten notes. The tension in the air was palpable, especially when I bumped into my brother, Mark, in the hallway. His face was drawn, shadows under his eyes betraying his sleepless nights. I pulled him aside, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did Dad ever mention a backup will to you?" His brow furrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition. "Yeah, he did mention something once, but I thought it was just talk," he replied, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Mark and I exchanged glances, a silent agreement forming between us. We had to dig deeper, but where to start? My mind raced with possibilities, and a sudden thought struck me. My father had always been meticulous about his documents. If there was a backup will, it had to be hidden somewhere secure. I felt a surge of determination. I had to find that safe. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions, swirling around the implications of Rachel's claim. I remembered how Dad used to say that family is everything, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel was playing a game with our lives. I needed to know what he really wanted for the business, for me, and for Mark. The thought of losing it all to someone who didn't understand our family's legacy was infuriating. The next day, I returned to the office with a new sense of purpose. I started checking the usual spots, behind books, under loose floorboards, but nothing seemed promising. Frustration mounted, and just as I was about to give up, I remembered the old filing cabinet in the corner. It had been locked for as long as I could remember, but perhaps it held the key to everything. My heart raced as I approached it, the metal cool under my fingertips. After rummaging through my father's desk for a spare key, I finally found one buried beneath a stack of yellowed papers. I inserted it into the lock, and with a satisfying click, the drawer swung open. Inside, I found a mix of old contracts and faded photographs, but something else caught my eye, a small, weathered envelope labeled will. My pulse quickened as I carefully pulled it out, praying it contained the answers I sought. As I opened the envelope, a rush of adrenaline surged through me. Inside was a neatly folded document, the familiar script unmistakable. It was the original will, outlining my father's intentions clearly, and it was nothing like what Rachel had presented. My heart sank at the thought of how she had manipulated the situation, and anger bubbled up inside me. I couldn't believe she would go this far. I took a moment to collect myself, knowing that I needed to be strategic about how to proceed. Mark was my only ally, and I had to share this discovery with him carefully. I called him over to the office, my hands trembling as I showed him the document. His eyes widened as he read through it, disbelief etched across his face. "This changes everything," he said, his voice low but charged with excitement. As we discussed the implications, I felt a mix of relief and dread. The original will not only reaffirm my rightful place in the family business, but also included provisions for my estranged sibling, someone I hadn't seen in years. This revelation complicated everything further. Who was this sibling? What role would they play in the unfolding drama? My heart raced at the thought of additional family tensions that could arise. We decided to consult a lawyer, knowing that the next steps needed to be executed with precision. The thought of facing Rachel again, armed with the truth, filled me with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. We scheduled a meeting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead would be fraught with complications. I could almost hear the whispers of the employees in the business speculating about the fallout. The atmosphere at the office had shifted. Employees were starting to notice the tension between Rachel and me. I could see them exchanging glances, their curiosity palpable. It felt like a powder keg, and I was afraid that if I didn't act soon, everything would explode. I needed to get ahead of the narrative to control the story before it spiraled out of my grasp. As the days passed, I noticed Rachel's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. She would linger in the hallways, casting wary glances my way, as if she could sense the storm brewing. It was unsettling to witness her unraveling facade. I couldn't help but wonder what she was hiding, and if she had more secrets tucked away than just the forged will. Mark and I met late one night to strategize. We needed to plan our next move carefully, and the stakes felt higher than ever. I could see the determination in his eyes. We were in this together, and failure was not an option. We began to map out a timeline of events, piecing together conversations and clues that might help us build a stronger case against Rachel. I was starting to feel the weight of the impending confrontation. The closer we got to presenting the original will, the more anxious I became. What would Rachel say? How would the family react? I had no doubt that she would fight tooth and nail to keep her grasp on what she believed was rightfully hers. The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't back down now. With the original will tucked safely in my bag, I felt a surge of determination. I knew I had to act quickly. The longer I waited, the more ground Rachel could cover. I decided to consult a lawyer who specialized in estate disputes, hoping they could shed light on my father's intentions and the legalities surrounding the will. The thought of stepping into a lawyer's office felt daunting, but it was time to take control of my life and my family's legacy. As I sat in the lawyer's office, surrounded by books and legal jargon, my heart raced. I laid the original will on the polished mahogany table, watching as the lawyer scanned it with a critical eye. His brow furrowed, and I felt a mix of hope and dread. "This is certainly different from what you described your stepmother presenting," he said slowly, looking up at me. "There are significant discrepancies here that we need to address." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by the anxiety of what lay ahead. I began to understand that this was just the beginning of a long battle. The lawyer explained the process of contesting a will, and I felt the weight of each word. My father's wishes were buried under layers of deceit, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I left the office with a sense of purpose, but also a gnawing fear. I needed to gather more evidence to support my case. I reached out to my brother, Jake, who had been suspicious of Rachel's intentions from start. We met at our favorite diner, the familiar smell of coffee and pancakes grounding me as I recounted everything I'd learned. Jake listened intently, his eyes narrowing with each revelation. I remember Dad mentioning a backup document, he said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. He was always meticulous about his affairs. Maybe we should look for it. My heart raced at the thought. What if there was another will? Something that could solidify my claim and expose Rachel's manipulation? We agreed to search Dad's office together, hoping to find more clues. The next day, we headed to the family business, a place that felt both comforting and suffocating. The walls were lined with memories, laughter echoing in my mind as I recalled countless family gatherings. But now, that warmth was overshadowed by tension. Rachel was in the office, and I could feel her presence like a dark cloud looming over us. We needed to be discreet. I couldn't let her know we were onto her. As we stepped into my father's office, I felt a rush of nostalgia mixed with anxiety. The room was exactly as he had left it, filled with books and papers that held fragments of his life. Jake and I began rummaging through drawers, sifting through old invoices and client files. My heart raced with each item we uncovered, half expecting to find the hidden document that could change everything. Hours passed, and just as I was about to lose hope, I stumbled upon a small, locked drawer in the desk. My pulse quickened as I fished out the key from the side pocket of my father's old jacket, a relic I had kept for sentimental reasons. The lock clicked open, and inside lay a neatly folded document. I held my breath as I pulled it out, my hands trembling with anticipation. It was another will, but this one was dated just a few months before his passing. My eyes widened as I read the provisions, my heart racing with disbelief. Not only did it reaffirm my rightful claim to the business, but it also included a surprising clause about my estranged sibling, someone I hadn't seen in years. My mind raced with questions. Why hadn't Rachel mentioned this? What was her plan if this document ever surfaced? I shared the news with Jake, who was equally shocked. "This changes everything," he said, excitement bubbling beneath the surface. We knew we had to act fast, but the thought of confronting Rachel again filled me with dread. I could almost hear her voice, laced with disdain, insisting that her version of the will was the only one that mattered. But now, I had proof, real proof that could turn the tide. With the original will and this new document, I felt a renewed sense of power. But I also felt the pressure mounting. Word had started to spread among the employees about the family dispute, and I could see the tension in their eyes. They were loyal to my father, but I knew Rachel would try to sway them with her charm and manipulation. I had to prepare for her next move, knowing that the stakes were higher than ever. As the days passed, I felt like I was living in a whirlwind of uncertainty. I began to notice Rachel's behavior shift. She was more guarded and less approachable. It was as if she sensed that I was closing in on the truth. I overheard her speaking in hushed tones with some of the staff, her laughter a sharp contrast to the seriousness of the situation. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was planning something, and I had to stay one step ahead. Jake and I devised a plan to gather more information about Rachel's dealings. We started talking to employees, discreetly asking about her interactions and any unusual decisions she had made recently. It felt like we were detectives in our own family drama, and the thrill of the chase fueled our determination. But with each conversation, I could feel the tension in the air thickening. The atmosphere at the office was shifting, and soon, we'd have to face Rachel again. The more we dug, the more we uncovered. It became clear that Rachel had been making decisions that favored her interests, sidelining my father's vision for the business. I was furious, but I had to remain calm. I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions. Instead, I focused on gathering evidence that would expose her manipulation, all while preparing myself for the inevitable confrontation that lay ahead. I felt the walls closing in as I realized the depth of Rachel's deceit. This was no longer just about the will. It was about the legacy my father had built and the future of the family business. I needed to be strategic, to plan my next steps carefully. The stakes were rising, and I could feel the weight of the impending showdown looming over me like a storm cloud. The tension in the office was palpable. I had scheduled a meeting with the employees of the family business, a gathering I hoped would shed light on the murky waters we were navigating. As I walked in, I noticed the concerned expressions on their faces, whispers circulating like a low hum of discontent. I had to address the elephant in the room: the will, the business, and the betrayal that had shaken our foundation. After a brief introduction, I could see their curiosity peaked. I know things have been chaotic since my father passed, and I want to clarify a few things about the direction we're heading. I began, my voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside me. I felt the weight of their expectations resting on my shoulders. If I falter now, it could jeopardize not just my claim, but the future of the business. Rachel had been lurking at the edges of the room, her presence a reminder of the battle ahead. I could see her calculating every word I spoke, trying to gauge how much I knew. It was unsettling, knowing she was listening, ready to pounce on any sign of weakness. But I pressed on, sharing my vision for the business and subtly hinting at the discrepancies I had uncovered in the will. Their faces turned serious as I mentioned the backup document, a thread I hoped would unravel the tangled web Rachel had woven. As I wrapped up the meeting, a few employees approached me, their expressions a mix of sympathy and concern. One of them, Mark, had been with the company for over a decade. "I've seen a lot of changes around here, but this feels different," he said, his voice low. I nodded, knowing he sensed the turmoil beneath the surface. "I'm doing everything I can to get to the bottom of it," I assured him, grateful for his support. The more I dug into the situation, the more I realized how deep Rachel's manipulation ran. It wasn't just about the will, it was about control. I recall the conversation with my father where he had mentioned wanting to secure the business's future for all his children, including the estranged sibling I had never met. That thought nagged at me, a reminder that there were pieces of this puzzle I still needed to uncover. After the meeting, I decided to visit the law office that had handled my father's estate. I hoped to find more documentation that could strengthen my case. As I sat across from the lawyer, I noticed his discomfort as I inquired about the will. He shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact. It was a subtle cue, but it felt like a crack in the facade. Something was off, and I was determined to find out what. The lawyer finally handed me a folder filled with papers, but I could tell it was incomplete. "This is everything we have on file, but there might be more in your father's personal records," he said cautiously. My heart raced. This was my chance to dig deeper. I thanked him and left, feeling a mix of hope and urgency. If there was more evidence to be found, I had to get to it before Rachel could bury it. Back at the office, I felt the pressure mounting. I needed to act quickly, but I also had to be smart. I called my brother, eager to share what I had discovered. "We need to go through Dad's office together. There might be something there that Rachel doesn't want us to find," I urged him. He agreed, his voice tinged with the same urgency I felt. We had to work together to unearth the truth, and fast. As we sifted through the contents of my father's office, I felt a mix of nostalgia and sorrow. Each item told a story, and yet there was an undercurrent of betrayal that permeated the air. Finally, we stumbled upon a locked drawer in his desk. My heart raced as I realized this could be the key to everything. We had to find a way to open it, and I was determined not to leave until we did. My brother and I worked in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. I could feel the weight of my father's legacy pressing down on us. After what felt like an eternity, we managed to pry the drawer open. Inside, we found a collection of documents, including a handwritten note from my father. It was dated just a few months before his death and mentioned a revised will that would ensure fairness among all his children. My hands trembled as I read the note aloud. "I want to make sure everyone is taken care of, including my other child. It's important to me that no one feels left out." The words echoed in the room, filling the silence with a sense of urgency. This was the proof I needed, the evidence that could turn the tide in my favor. I could hardly believe my eyes. My father had wanted to protect all of us. Just then, my phone buzzed, breaking the moment. It was a text from one of the employees I had spoken to earlier. "I heard Rachel is planning a big meeting next week. She's trying to solidify her control over the business. Be careful." My heart sank. Rachel was already plotting her next move, and I had to be ready to counter it. The stakes were higher than ever, and I could feel the pressure rising. With the original will in hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was no longer just about me. It was about my father's legacy and the future of the family business. I needed to gather my allies, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. I shared my findings with my brother, and together we strategized how to present the evidence to the family and the employees without tipping off Rachel too soon. As the days passed, I could feel the tension in the air, not just in my family but within the company. Employees were whispering about the rift, and I knew it wouldn't be long before Rachel tried to rally them to her side. I had to act decisively to turn the tide before it was too late. My brother and I agreed to hold a meeting of our own, a chance to lay everything on the table and expose the truth once and for all. I spent sleepless nights crafting my speech, rehearsing the words that would reveal Rachel's deceit. I could already picture her reaction, the denial, the anger. But I had the truth on my side, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I knew this was just the beginning, but I was prepared to face whatever came next. As I walked into the office the next morning, a weight settled on my chest. The tension in the air felt palpable, as if the walls themselves were aware of the betrayal that had unfolded. I could almost hear Rachel's voice echoing in my mind, taunting me with her smug certainty that she had gotten away with everything. But I was determined to turn the tide. I needed to devise a plan that would not only expose her, but also rally the family business employees to my side. I spent the morning gathering my thoughts, going over every detail I had learned so far. Rachel's facade was starting to crack. I could see the nervous glances exchanged among the employees. Whispers of the dispute had made their way through the office, and I knew that if I played my cards right, I could use that to my advantage. They were starting to question her integrity, and I needed to keep that momentum going. During lunch, I cornered my brother, Mark, in the break room. He was leaning against the counter, a frown etched on his face. "I've been thinking about that backup document Dad mentioned," I said, lowering my voice. "Do you think it could really change things?" Mark nodded slowly, his eyes darting around as if afraid someone might overhear. I remember him saying something about it, but I never thought it would come to this. "We need to find it, and fast." The urgency in his voice spurred me into action. I suggested we meet later that evening to dig through Dad's old files. If there was a chance that backup document existed, it could be the key to unraveling Rachel's scheme. I could almost feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I thought about the potential discovery. But I also felt the fear of what we might uncover. More lies, more manipulation. After work, Mark and I slipped into Dad's office, the familiar scent of old wood and leather filling the air. The desk was cluttered with papers, and I felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with anger. This was the space where Dad had planned our future, and now it felt tainted by Rachel's greed. We started sifting through the mess, hoping to find any sign of the backup will or any correspondence that might hint at its existence. As we rummaged through old folders, Mark stumbled upon a stack of envelopes tied with a string. He pulled them out and flipped through them, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock. "These are all letters from Dad to a lawyer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced. Could these letters be connected to the backup will? My mind raced with possibilities, and I urged him to read them aloud. The first letter was dated a few months before Dad's passing. It outlined his wishes regarding the family business, and my stomach dropped as I realized he had explicitly mentioned wanting to protect it from any outside influences. The subsequent letters contained discussions about estate planning and a mention of an alternate document that would ensure the business stayed in the family. My pulse quickened. This was it. This could prove Rachel's manipulation. "We need to show this to a lawyer immediately," I said, my voice shaking with urgency. Mark nodded, his brow furrowed as he processed the implications. "But what if Rachel finds out? She'll do anything to keep her grip on everything Dad built. We have to be careful about how we approach this." The thought of Rachel's retaliation sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. As we continued to sift through the letters, I felt a surge of determination. The stakes were rising, and I needed to be strategic. I decided it was time to gather more support. I reached out to a few trusted employees, inviting them for a casual dinner to discuss the future of the business. I could sense their unease about Rachel's leadership, and I hoped to harness that unease into a collective force for change. The dinner was set for Friday night, and I spent the next few days meticulously planning how to present my findings. I wanted to ensure that everyone understood the gravity of the situation without directly accusing Rachel just yet. The plan was to plant the seeds of doubt and rally them behind me. As I prepped my speech, I felt the weight of responsibility resting heavily on my shoulders. I was not just fighting for myself, but for the legacy Dad had left behind. On the night of the dinner, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. As I watched my colleagues filter into the restaurant, I felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. I had prepared a few talking points, but I knew the real power would come from sharing my story. My father's vision for the business, the trust he had placed in me, and the betrayal that had occurred. I wanted them to see that this was not just a personal battle. It was about preserving the integrity of the company we all loved. As we sat down, I initiated a light conversation, gauging everyone's thoughts on recent changes in the company. The murmurs of discontent were subtle but present, and I felt a flicker of hope. I knew that if I could connect with them on an emotional level, they would be more likely to support me. After a few minutes of casual banter, I decided it was time to pivot the conversation toward the real issue at hand. I took a deep breath, my heart racing as I began to share my father's vision and the shocking news of the will. As I spoke, I could see the disbelief and concern wash over their faces. I emphasized the importance of unity in the face of adversity, highlighting how Rachel's actions threatened not just my future, but the future of the business as a whole. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to understanding, and I felt a surge of hope. After I finished, the room fell silent for a moment, and then one of my colleagues, Sarah, spoke up. I've noticed things have changed since Rachel took over. It feels like the company isn't the same anymore. Her words resonated with the others, and soon they began to voice their concerns. I could feel the tide turning, and it filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just my fight. It was about all of us. As the evening progressed, we shared stories of our experiences under Rachel's leadership, each one adding weight to my cause. I knew I had struck a chord, and with every passing moment, I felt the support growing. The conversation shifted from disbelief to a collective resolve. We needed to stand together against Rachel's manipulation. I could almost taste the victory, but I knew we had to tread carefully. The real battle was still ahead. As the days passed, I found myself in a whirlwind of strategy and anxiety. The support from the employees had given me a renewed sense of purpose, but I knew we needed more than just moral backing. We needed solid evidence. I spent late nights poring over my father's documents, hoping to uncover anything that could turn the tide. The thought of confronting Rachel again loomed over me like a dark cloud, but I was determined to expose her manipulation. One afternoon, I decided to reach out to a family friend, someone who had been close to my father and had a keen understanding of his values. I needed to know if they were aware of the original will and if they could shed light on Rachel's behavior. Over coffee, I cautiously broached the subject, mentioning the discrepancies I had found. Their reaction was immediate, eyes widening in surprise, followed by a cautious nod. I knew about the backup will, but I was threatened to keep quiet. They confessed, lowering their voice as if the walls might have ears. The revelation sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just Rachel's greed. It was a calculated move to silence anyone who could challenge her. I felt a mix of anger and urgency. I needed to gather more allies, people who could corroborate my findings and help build a case against her. I spent the next few days reaching out to others who had known my father, piecing together their memories and insights. Each conversation added another layer to my understanding of his true intentions. With a clearer picture forming, I knew it was time to test Rachel. I invited her to lunch under the guise of wanting to mend our relationship. I wanted to see how she would react to the mention of the original will. As we sat across from each other, I could feel the tension crackling in the air. I casually brought up my father's vision for the business and how he had spoken about wanting to keep it in the family. Rachel's smile faltered for just a moment, and I caught a flicker of unease in her eyes. I pressed further, discussing the importance of family and loyalty, gauging her responses. She quickly regained her composure, launching into a rehearsed monologue about how my father had entrusted her with everything. I could tell she was on edge, and it fueled my determination. If I could keep her off balance, I might find a way to extract more information. I ended the lunch feeling both empowered and anxious. I needed to move quickly before she could fortify her defenses. Back at home, I dug deeper into my father's past dealings, searching for any contracts or documents that might support my claims. I stumbled upon an old email thread discussing plans for the business that my father had initiated long before Rachel entered the picture. The emails contained mentions of my estranged sibling, a person I had long forgotten about. My father had intended to include them in the business, and I felt a surge of hope. This was another piece of the puzzle that could shift the balance in my favor. Armed with this new information, I reached out to my estranged sibling, unsure of what to expect. I had heard rumors about their struggles, and I felt a pang of guilt for not being there. When we finally connected, I explained the situation and the existence of the original will. Their reaction was a mix of disbelief and curiosity. They were eager to know more, and I could sense an opportunity to unite against Rachel's deceit. Together, we began to brainstorm how to confront her and reclaim what was rightfully ours. As I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I organized a small gathering with my brother and a few trusted friends. I wanted to rehearse our approach, ensuring we presented a united front. The atmosphere was tense, filled with anticipation and anxiety. We laid out our findings, discussing how to frame the conversation to maximize impact. The stakes were high, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us. We had to be strategic, calm, and unwavering in our resolve. The day of the confrontation arrived, and I felt a mix of dread and excitement. I had invited Rachel to the family business under the pretense of discussing future plans. As she entered the conference room, her smile was as bright as ever, but I could see the flicker of apprehension in her eyes. My heart raced as I began to lay out our findings, presenting the evidence of my father's true intentions. I watched her expression shift from confidence to disbelief, her carefully crafted facade beginning to crack. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on her face. I wasn't just challenging her authority, I was dismantling the entire narrative she had built around her control of the business. I felt a rush of adrenaline, knowing that I was finally standing up for my father's legacy. My brother chimed in, reinforcing my points and emphasizing the need for transparency and accountability. The atmosphere was electric, charged with tension as Rachel struggled to regain her footing. Rachel's response was defensive, a mix of anger and desperation. She tried to dismiss our findings, insisting that my father had made his choices clear. But we pressed on, unyielding in our resolve. I could see the employees peering in from the glass walls, their curiosity piqued. The stakes had never felt higher, and I knew that this moment could change everything. We were on the verge of exposing the truth, and I was ready to fight for my father's legacy, no matter the cost. The tension in the room was palpable, a tightrope walk between revelation and denial. Rachel's eyes darted around, gauging the reactions of the employees who had gathered, some of them whispering among themselves. I could sense the gravity of the moment. This was no longer just a family dispute. It was a public spectacle. I took a deep breath, determined to seize the opportunity while the spotlight was on us. This was my chance to lay everything bare and finally put Rachel's claims to the test. As I stood there, the weight of my father's legacy felt heavier than ever. I pulled out the original will from my bag, the paper crinkling slightly in my grip. "You claim my father left everything to you, but here's the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I held the document aloft, letting the sunlight catch the ink. It felt like holding a piece of my father's soul, and I was ready to defend it. Rachel's expression shifted from anger to a strained smile, as if she were attempting to mask her panic. "That can't be real. You must be mistaken," she shouted, her voice cracking. The murmurs from the employees grew louder, and I could see some of them exchanging glances, unsure of what to believe. It was clear that my stepmother's facade was starting to crumble, and I had to keep the pressure on. I stepped forward, my heart racing. "I'm not mistaken, Rachel. This will was hidden away, and it clearly states my father's intentions. You can't just rewrite history because it suits you." The employees shifted uneasily, some crossing their arms, others leaning in closer. I could feel their eyes on me, their curiosity mixed with sympathy. This was no longer just a fight for my inheritance. It was a fight for my father's honor. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she attempted to regain control of the situation. "This is all a misunderstanding, a cruel trick," she insisted, her voice rising. But the more she protested, the more I could see the cracks in her armor. I turned to the employees, making eye contact with those who had been with the company for years. "You all knew my father. You know how he valued integrity and family. This is what he wanted." I could see a few nodding, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to support. It was as if my words were resonating, igniting a flicker of rebellion against Rachel's claims. She sensed the tide turning, and her demeanor shifted to one of desperation. "You're ruining everything," she shouted, her voice breaking, but it only made the room more sympathetic to my cause. I was gaining ground, and I couldn't let up now. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I turned back to Rachel, who was now backed against the wall, her bravado fading. "You can't keep lying to everyone, Rachel. The truth will come out, and you know it. You might think you can control this situation, but I won't let you. Not anymore." My heart raced, fueled by the righteousness of my cause. I was tired of being in the shadows, and I was ready to step into the light. Just then, one of the employees, Mark, spoke up. "We all respected your father, and we believe in what he stood for. If there's a chance this will is real, we want to support you, not her." His words hung in the air, a rallying cry that sent a ripple of agreement through the group. I felt a swell of gratitude. I wasn't alone in this fight. With each passing moment, I was reclaiming not just my father's legacy, but my own sense of agency. Rachel's face paled, and I could see the fear etched in her features. "You don't know what you're doing. This isn't just about the will," she yelled, desperation lacing her tone. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the original will, and I had the support of those who believed in my father's true intentions. The pieces were falling into place, and I was ready to confront her once and for all. As the murmurs intensified, I could feel the weight of the moment. This was it, the breaking point. I needed to make sure that everyone understood the stakes involved. This isn't just about money or property. It's about the values my father instilled in us. He wouldn't have wanted his legacy tainted by deceit. My voice rang out, clear and unwavering, as I pointedly looked at Rachel, who seemed to shrink under the pressure. I glanced at my brother, who was standing at the edge of the gathering, a mixture of pride and concern etched on his face. I knew he was with me, and that gave me strength. We had both grown up in our father's shadow, and now it was time to step into our own light. I took another deep breath, ready to push forward. "I'll take this to court if I have to, but I won't let you walk away with what isn't yours." Rachel's expression morphed into one of pure fury. "You think you could just take everything from me? You have no idea what I've sacrificed," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. The employees looked taken aback, clearly unsure of how to react to her outburst. I could see the room shifting, their loyalty hanging in the balance, and I needed to capitalize on that. I squared my shoulders, refusing to back down. "Sacrifices? You mean the ones you made to manipulate my father into signing a will that favored you?" I could feel the room gasp collectively, the tension thickening. Rachel's face flushed, and for a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. I could sense that I had struck a nerve, and I pressed on, determined to reveal the truth. The employees exchanged glances, the tide of support turning firmly in my direction. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was the moment I'd been waiting for. Rachel was losing her grip, and I was ready to expose the truth behind her facade. "You've taken enough from this family, Rachel. It's time for the truth to come out, and I won't let you silence me any longer." As I spoke, I could feel the energy shift in the room. People were leaning in, eager to hear more. I could see the resolve in their faces, and it fueled my determination. I was no longer just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone who had ever been manipulated or silenced. The stakes had never been higher, and I was ready to take the next step in this battle for my father's legacy. The courtroom was tense, a palpable silence hanging in the air as I took my seat. My heart raced, not just from nerves, but from the weight of what was about to unfold. Today was the day I would finally expose the truth, and I could feel every eye in the room on me, especially my stepmom's, whose cold stare felt like ice piercing through me. I took a deep breath, ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As the judge entered, I could see my brother sitting beside me, his expression a mix of support and apprehension. The stepmom was flanked by her attorney, a slick man who had been throwing around threats for weeks, trying to intimidate me into backing down. But I was resolute. I had gathered enough evidence to turn the tide. I glanced at the original will, securely in my folder, the document that could shatter her facade. The proceedings began, and the judge called for the presentation of evidence. My lawyer stood, outlining the inconsistencies in the will my stepmom had presented. Each word felt like a hammer striking a nail, each inconsistency digging deeper into her carefully constructed narrative. I could see her shifting in her seat, her bravado faltering as the truth began to unravel. It was my turn. I stood up, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. "Your Honor, I would like to present the original will, which I discovered hidden in my father's safe. This document clearly outlines his intentions for the family business and includes provisions for my estranged sibling, which were entirely omitted in the will presented by my stepmother." My voice trembled slightly, but I pressed on, fueled by the urgency of the situation. As I handed over the document, I caught a glimpse of my stepmom's face, and for the first time I saw fear. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to give me strength. The judge examined the will, his brow furrowing as he noted the differences. I could feel the room's energy shift, the tide turning in my favor as whispers began to circulate among the spectators. My stepmom's attorney sprang into action, attempting to discredit my findings. He argued that the original will was outdated and irrelevant, but I had anticipated this. My lawyer countered with evidence of my father's clear intentions, citing conversations and testimonies from family friends who had been aware of the backup will. Each point hit hard, and I could see my stepmom's confidence eroding. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric, and I could sense the crowd's growing sympathy for my plight. I noticed a few family friends in the back, their expressions filled with concern and support. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. I had allies who understood the depth of my father's love for me and the manipulation that had taken place. After a tense back and forth, the judge called for a recess, allowing everyone to digest the revelations. I stepped outside, my brother by my side, and the weight of the world felt lighter. I knew the fight wasn't over, but I could see a path forward. My stepmom's reputation was crumbling, and I had no intention of letting her off the hook easily. When we returned, the judge delivered his ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of the original will. The court recognizes the validity of the document and the intentions of the deceased. The family business and its assets will be transferred to the rightful heir, as outlined in the original will. My heart soared. It was as if the clouds had parted, revealing a clear sky after a storm. The reaction in the courtroom was immediate. Gasps echoed, and murmurs filled the air as my stepmom's face turned ashen. I could hardly contain my relief, but I also felt a pang of sadness for what had transpired. My father had been gone too soon, and the family bonds that had once been strong were now irrevocably fractured. Yet, I knew I had to protect his legacy. As we left the courthouse, I felt a mix of triumph and sorrow. I had won the battle, but at what cost? The whispers of gossip had already begun, and I could sense the divide in the family deepening. My stepmom would not take this lightly, and I was prepared for the fallout. But for now, I had reclaimed my father's legacy, and that was a victory worth celebrating. In the following weeks, I focused on rebuilding the family business, surrounding myself with loyal employees who believed in my vision. The support from the community was overwhelming, and it helped me heal from the emotional turmoil of the court case. I started organizing team meetings, laying out a new direction that honored my father's values while also making the business my own. My estranged sibling reached out, and we began to forge a tentative relationship. The shared pain of our father's passing brought us closer, and I found comfort in knowing that we could support each other through the chaos. Together, we started planning a memorial for our father, a way to celebrate his life and the legacy he left behind. Meanwhile, my stepmom was not silent. She spread rumors and tried to undermine my authority, but I stood firm. I had the backing of the community, and my employees were fiercely loyal. Every time she tried to sabotage me, I reminded myself that I was fighting not just for my inheritance, but for my father's memory and the values he instilled in me. As the months passed, I found a new sense of purpose. I started a scholarship fund in my father's name, helping young entrepreneurs pursue their dreams. It was a way to honor his legacy and make a positive impact in the community. The more I focused on building something meaningful, the more the shadows of betrayal faded. In the end, I realized that while the battle for my father's legacy had been painful, it had also given me the strength to grow and evolve. I had faced my fears, reclaimed what was mine, and emerged stronger. The experience taught me that family can be complicated, but love and integrity can prevail, even in the darkest of times. Thanks so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed our videos, please like, share, and subscribe to the Llama if you want more drama. It truly means a lot.